Let's go ahead and talk about navigation. As you know, navigation is an important component when it comes to building applications, because your applications need to be able to go from screen A to B, B to C, maybe back to A, and so forth. An example here is this. We need a way in which perhaps that when we click one button, we can go to movie details. We'll display the details of the movies that we are showing. So traditionally, we would use start activity and pass the destination activity from where we are and so forth. And we could pass, of course, data around as well that way. But this way of doing things, it only works for simple navigation cases, not for complex cases. Because as you know, your applications may be growing and there are other use cases that need to be addressed, such as, bottom nav, and you have to control which bottom navigation is clicked, which button. And there's a lot of complication that happens when we are using just start activity as it is. What is the solution? Well, Jetpack navigation component, that is solution. Remember, Jetpack is this collection of tools and libraries that enable us developers to build modern applications. Make it possible to have concise and consistent code across all the different devices in Android. So within the Jetpack library, if you will, there is navigation component. So navigation component is a set of modern tools and libraries for handling complex navigation cases in Android. Now, the navigation component has three major parts working together. These are navigation graph, nav host, so navigation host, and the navigation controller. Okay, let's take a look at something here. So the way I like to visualize a navigation component is as follows. So we have a navigation component as the whole base component, as you see here, and inside we have the navigation controller, and then inside of that we have the nav host, and then we have the nav graph. So let's look at what a nav controller is. Well, a nav controller is the central API of navigation component. So here this class instructs navigation to occur. This controller, as the name implies, controls, so instructs. It has instructions to say go and navigate to route X. And the navigation host, as the name implies, it hosts each navigation graph item, meaning it swaps out each destination, which in this case could be an activity or a composable in our case. So that happens when, for instance, users navigate to a new screen. Navigation graph holds information about destination or screen composable. It all means the same thing. So essentially the navigation graph, this is where we have a graph containing all these nodes being the actual destination. In this case, could be composables, activities, or fragments, and so forth. Most importantly, these graphs have connection. These connections do carry information about this navigation, right? I want to emphasize the nav graph. It would look something like this, right? In this case, we're talking about composables. So the nav graph would have, for instance, detailed screen, splash screen, and home screen, right? And many other screens. But most importantly, again, there would be more information about these nodes, how they are interacting or how they could interact, right? For instance, detailed screen, for instance, in this case, splash screen connects to home screen, and home screen could be connected to the detailed screen or vice versa. Okay? So this is the structure that navigation component, which allows us to do a little bit more complex navigation as opposed to the usual old school start activity and pass information. All right, so now let's go to code and start putting together this structure. Now, as we put together this structure, this navigation component structure in code, I want you to keep in mind these diagrams that I've shown you here. It may seem a little bit confusing at first, I will confess, but I'll try my best to relate what we're going to be doing to what I've shown you here in this diagram. Or these diagrams, I should say, because there are a few of them. Okay, let's go back to our wonderful, beautiful, great code.